When millionaire twins fall in love with the same girl, everything changes. But what truth could possibly be so powerful that it would shatter their lives forever? That's exactly what we'll uncover in this story. This is the story of two young millionaire heirs, identical in face, but completely opposite in heart, who risked everything for one girl. And in the end, one truth would change everything. Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you'll see why the choice she made and the secret she carried left two powerful men on their knees. Nathaniel and Nicholas Cross. To the world, they were the golden heirs, twin sons of billionaire real estate magnate Richard Cross. Born into a life of privilege, raised in penthouses and private schools, the twins were inseparable as children. But as they grew older, their differences sharpened. Nathaniel, calm, disciplined, the thinker. The one who wore dark suits and carried himself like the future CEO. He loved order, numbers, and the weight of responsibility. Nicholas, the wild spirit, charming, daring, with a reckless streak that drew people to him like moths to fire. He loved cars, fast deals, and even faster romances. The brothers loved each other, yes, but beneath the surface, a rivalry brewed. One always trying to outshine the other, to claim their father's attention, to prove who truly deserved the empire. And then came her. Her name was Clara Bennett. She wasn't from their world of limousines and marble floors. Clara was ordinary. Or at least that's what the twins thought when they first saw her. She was a university student, working part-time at a downtown bookstore cafe. She wore faded jeans, her hair tied in a loose bun, and she had that kind of smile that disarmed people. The kind that felt like sunlight after weeks of rain. It was Nicholas who saw her first. He stumbled into the cafe after a late night of parties, his tie loose, his charm switched on. He ordered coffee, flirted casually, expecting the usual giggle or blush. But Clara didn't bite. She simply smiled politely, slid him his drink, and returned to her books. Nicholas had never been ignored before, and that's when he knew he had to have her. What Nicholas didn't know was that Nathaniel, his brother, had already met Clara, quietly, without fanfare. Nathaniel had discovered the same cafe weeks earlier, drawn by its quiet atmosphere where he could work on business strategies. He had noticed Clara right away. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear as she read. The way her eyes lit up when she recommended books to customers. Nathaniel hadn't spoken much, just polite exchanges. But in silence, something had sparked in him too. Neither twin knew the other had fallen for the same girl. Not yet. And so their worlds, wealthy, powerful, untouchable, were about to collide with Clara's world of simplicity, struggle, and secrets. Because Clara carried a truth she'd buried so deeply that she believed no one would ever uncover it. But truth has a way of surfacing, especially when love and rivalry tear the ground beneath it.
Nicholas Cross was not a man who handled rejection well. He had grown up in a world where doors opened at his smile, where women leaned in at his touch, and where money smoothed every edge of his life. But Clara Bennett, she was different. The morning after his first failed attempt to charm her, Nicholas stood in front of the cafe's mirror-polished counter once again. This time, he was determined. He wore a tailored jacket, his best cologne, and the easy grin that had won over socialites and models alike. "Black coffee, no sugar," he said smoothly, leaning across the counter. "And maybe your name to go with it." Clara didn't even blink. She scribbled his order, slid the cup toward him, and answered simply, "Clara." "Beautiful," Nicholas murmured. "Clara. You know, I don't usually ask twice, but something tells me you're worth breaking my own rules for. Dinner tonight?" Clara's lips quirked upward, not in flirtation, but amusement. "That's generous of you, but no thank you." Nicholas froze, caught completely off guard. The cafe went silent in his mind. No? Nobody told Nicholas Cross no. He laughed lightly, trying to recover. "You're joking, right?" Clara met his eyes, calm and steady. "I'm not. I don't date customers." For the first time in years, Nicholas walked away unsettled and intrigued. What Nicholas didn't know was that Clara's refusal wasn't rooted in disinterest, it was rooted in self-preservation. She had rules for herself, carefully built walls, and Nicholas Cross was exactly the type of man who could smash those walls to pieces if she let him in. Later that week, Nathaniel entered the same cafe, his laptop under his arm. Unlike Nicholas, he didn't come to impress. He came because the cafe had become his refuge from boardrooms and high-rise offices. Clara greeted him with that same warm smile she gave everyone. "The usual?" she asked. Nathaniel nodded, appreciating that she remembered. "A chai latte, light foam." She always got it just right. That day, Nathaniel noticed something different. Clara looked tired, shadows under her eyes, her hands moving slower than usual. "You should rest," he said quietly, as she handed him his drink. Clara blinked, surprised. Most customers never noticed her exhaustion, let alone cared. "I'll rest when tuition's paid," she joked softly. Nathaniel didn't laugh. He simply studied her with those thoughtful gray eyes of his, as though he wanted to understand the unspoken weight behind her words. And Clara, she felt seen. But fate has a cruel sense of timing. The very next evening, Nicholas returned, determined to win her. And this time, he wasn't alone. Nathaniel walked in first, adjusting his cufflinks. Nicholas sauntered behind, all charm and swagger. The twins froze when they saw each other inside the cafe. "Nate, what are you doing here?" Nicholas asked, suspicion creeping into his voice. "I could ask you the same thing," Nathaniel replied, his tone calm but edged. Both turned their gaze toward Clara, who stood awkwardly behind the counter. She glanced between them, her brow furrowing. She hadn't realized until that moment that the two striking men, so similar in appearance, were related. Twins. And suddenly, everything clicked. Their looks, their energy, their strangely familiar eyes. Nicholas smirked, recovering first. "So, that's why you've been sneaking off to cafes, Nate. I should have known. Tell me, how long have you been trying to charm her with your business lectures?" Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "This isn't about charm." "Oh, come on," Nicholas scoffed. "Everything's about charm, especially with her." Clara raised her hands quickly, her voice firm but not unkind. "Gentlemen, I don't know what this is, but I'm not interested in being a prize." The twins turned toward her, their rivalry forgotten for a heartbeat. Nicholas chuckled. "Relax, Clara. Nobody's calling you a prize. You're—" He hesitated, searching for the right word. "A challenge." Clara's expression hardened. "Then you've already lost." Nicholas opened his mouth to retort, but Nathaniel's hand clamped on his arm. "That's enough," Nathaniel said sharply. "You're embarrassing yourself." The cafe fell silent. Nicholas pulled free, his pride stung, But behind his irritation was something else. Realization. His brother, the one he always competed with, wanted Clara too. And that changed everything. From that day on, the rivalry grew. Nicholas sent flowers to the cafe, bright bouquets that Clara left untouched. Nathaniel offered to walk her home after late shifts, earning quiet conversations that stretched into the night. Nicholas invited her to charity galas, flaunting the glittering world of wealth. Clara declined, uninterested in being paraded like a trophy. Nathaniel instead invited her to quiet dinners, where he asked her about her dreams and listened when she spoke. Clara felt torn, not because she loved them both, but because their presence forced her to confront something she had buried, a truth she swore she'd never reveal, a truth about her past. And as the rivalry intensified, Clara realized that one day soon, she would no longer be able to keep that truth hidden. Meanwhile, their father, Richard Cross, began to notice. The twins were distracted in meetings. Nicholas skipped appointments. Nathaniel snapped at minor mistakes. One evening, Richard called them both into his office, the city skyline blazing behind him. "You're both off your game," he said, voice cold. "What's going on?" Neither answered. "Fine, but understand this. Whoever proves themselves worthy of running this empire will inherit it. I won't hand it to sons who lose their focus over distractions." Nicholas smirked. "Then maybe we'll just prove who deserves her too." Nathaniel shot him a warning look, but Richard raised a brow. "Her? What girl?" Neither twin spoke. Richard leaned back, studying them. "Careful, boys. Women have toppled empires before. Don't let one topple mine." The twins left in silence, but that night, Nicholas's smirk burned in Nathaniel's mind. This wasn't just about love anymore. It was about pride, power, and the one girl caught between them. And Clara? Clara stood in her tiny apartment that night, staring at a shoebox hidden under her bed. Inside were photographs, letters, and documents she had sworn never to show anyone. She pressed her hand against the lid, trembling. Because if Nathaniel or Nicholas ever discovered what was inside, it wouldn't just break their hearts. It would change everything.
Clara Bennett wasn't born into wealth. Far from it. While Nathaniel and Nicholas grew up in glass towers with private drivers and trust funds, Clara grew up in a neighborhood where sirens screamed at night and rent was always overdue. Her father left when she was 6, and her mother worked 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. Clara learned early that life doesn't hand out gifts. You fight for scraps or you starve. And she carried another burden. Her mother had whispered it to her once, late at night, when Clara was still too young to understand its weight. A truth about her father. About why he left. About debts, betrayals, and secrets that could never be spoken aloud. It was the kind of truth that chained you, even years later. By the time Clara turned 19, she had sworn 2 promises. She would never let herself depend on anyone else, and she would never let the truth about her past come to light. That's why she worked the cafe, why she studied late into the night, why she ignored the pull of Nicholas's charm and Nathaniel's quiet steadiness, because letting them in meant risk, and risk meant exposure. But no matter how much she tried to stay distant, the twins kept breaking through her defenses. One night after her shift, Nathaniel walked her home. The streets were quiet, the glow of streetlights reflecting off puddles from a recent rain. "You don't have to walk me every time," Clara said, hugging her jacket close. "I want to," Nathaniel replied simply. "Besides, it gives me a chance to hear you talk about books. You're the only person I know who can make a story sound like a whole world." Clara smiled despite herself.
Stories are worlds. They remind us we're not trapped in just one. Nathaniel studied her profile as she spoke, and for the first time, Clara felt the dangerous tug of connection. He wasn't trying to impress her. He wasn't even trying to win. He was just listening. That scared her more than Nicholas's relentless pursuit ever could. Meanwhile, Nicholas wasn't one to surrender quietly. A week later, he pulled up outside the cafe in his red sports car, the engine growling like a beast. He walked in wearing a tailored suit, dropped his keys on the counter, and announced loud enough for everyone to hear, "Clara, pack your bag, we're going to Paris. Tonight." The cafe erupted in whispers. Clara froze. "Nicholas," she hissed under her breath, "you can't just—" "Why not?" he cut in, grinning. "Life's too short for hesitation. Paris, the Eiffel Tower, wine, music. Just say yes." Clara's cheeks burned, not with flattery, but with fury. "And leave my job? My classes? My life? No, Nicholas, I'm not a vacation. I'm not something you buy with plane tickets." Nicholas blinked, momentarily thrown. No woman had ever refused his grand gestures before. And yet he found himself more determined than ever. Clara's resistance was intoxicating. The truth was, Clara wasn't blind to either twin's pull. Nathaniel offered safety, the kind of man who would stand beside her in silence, steady as stone. Nicholas offered passion, the kind of man who would burn the world just to feel alive. But Clara wasn't free to choose. Not really. Because of the shoebox. Every night, she would pull it out from under her bed and stare at its contents. Faded documents, a birth certificate, a series of old letters, and one single photograph. In that photograph, a man stood beside her mother. A man with the same piercing gray eyes as Nathaniel and Nicholas. Her heart always raced when she looked at it, because the truth she carried wasn't just about herself, it was about them. Clara had spent years convincing herself that the truth didn't matter anymore, that as long as she kept her distance, as long as she never let anyone in, the past would stay buried. But now, with Nathaniel walking her home and Nicholas storming her cafe with flowers and cars, she could feel the walls she built cracking. And worse, she could feel something blooming inside her chest. Not just fear, not just caution, but affection. And affection was dangerous, because if she let herself fall, if she let herself choose one of them, the truth would surface. And when it did, it wouldn't just break their hearts. It would destroy their family. The inevitable happened one Friday night. Nathaniel had arrived at the cafe early, helping Clara close up by carrying chairs to the back. He didn't mind the work. It gave him time with her. Just as Clara thanked him, Nicholas walked in. He froze when he saw his twin holding a chair beside Clara, laughter in their eyes. "What is this?" Nicholas demanded, his voice sharp. "It's called cleaning up. Some people do it after work." Nathaniel set down the chair calmly. "Don't start." Nicholas stepped forward, anger flashing. "You think you can swoop in here with your quiet act and steal her from me? I saw her first." Clara's stomach dropped. "I'm not something to be stolen." But the brothers weren't listening. Years of rivalry boiled over in seconds. "You think you're better than me?" Nicholas spat. "No," Nathaniel said evenly. "I know I am." Nicholas lunged, shoving his brother back. Clara cried out, stepping between them before fists could fly. "Enough!" she shouted, her voice shaking. "If you can't respect me, then I don't want either of you in my life." Silence fell. The weight of her words crashed down like stone. For the first time, both twins realized that in their battle for Clara's heart, they might just lose her entirely. That night, after locking the cafe, Clara walked home alone, her hands trembling as she unlocked her apartment, her chest tight with emotion.
She pulled out the shoebox again, tears blurring her vision. She traced the edges of the old photograph, her heart breaking. Because if Nathaniel and Nicholas ever discovered that the truth, that the man in the picture, the man with those unmistakable gray eyes, was their father, and her father too, they would know she wasn't just the girl they both loved. She was their half-sister. And that was the truth that would change everything.
The days after the fight at the cafe were heavy with silence. Nathaniel stopped visiting for a while, retreating to long nights in his office, his mind torn between responsibility and the pull of Clara. Nicholas, meanwhile, doubled down, appearing at the cafe with expensive gifts and cocky smiles, pretending the clash hadn't shaken him. But Clara couldn't forget it. Their faces, so alike yet so different, burned in her memory. The raw anger in Nicholas's voice, the cutting certainty in Nathaniel's tone, and beneath it all, her own shame. Because they didn't know the truth, and every day she spent with them only made it harder to keep hiding. Nicholas had always been impulsive, but now his desperation sharpened into recklessness. One night he waited outside Clara's apartment with a bouquet of roses so large it looked like a garden had exploded in his arms. "Clara," he called when she appeared, "I know you're mad, but just hear me out." She froze on the steps, exhaustion written on her face. "Nicholas, it's late, please." "I can't stop thinking about you. I don't care what my brother thinks. I don't care about the company, the money, any of it. I just want you. Come away with me, Clara. Just say yes this time." His voice cracked with an honesty Clara hadn't expected. For a brief, fleeting second, her heart faltered. She saw the boy behind the bravado, the one desperate to be loved not for his money, but for himself. But then she thought of the shoebox, of the photograph, of the truth that would make his love not just impossible, but unbearable. She shook her head. "Nicholas, I can't." The pain in his eyes cut deep, but she forced herself to turn away. Nicholas's jaw clenched as he watched her lock inside, and in that moment his affection twisted into something darker, a burning need to win. Not just love, but against his brother. Nathaniel, on the other hand, didn't shower Clara with roses or Paris tickets. He simply showed up, quietly, consistently. When a storm flooded the street outside her apartment, he was there with an umbrella. When her landlord threatened rent hikes, Nathaniel slipped her the number of a legal advisor, no strings attached. He never pushed, never demanded, but his presence lingered like a promise. And Clara hated herself for wanting to lean on him. Because how could she, when the truth she carried would cut him deeper than any betrayal? Richard Cross wasn't blind. He saw the way his son's rivalry was bleeding into the business. Missed deadlines, reckless deals, tension in boardrooms. One evening, he called Clara into his office. She had been offered a part-time role assisting with a charity project, thanks to Nathaniel's quiet recommendation. Richard leaned back in his leather chair, eyes sharp. "You've become a distraction," he said bluntly. Clara's heart pounded. "I'm just helping with the foundation. I don't—" "Don't lie to me," Richard cut in, his voice like steel. "I know my sons, and I know the look in their eyes when they're fighting over something they want." He paused. "Or someone." Clara's throat went dry. "You seem like a good girl, but be careful. My sons are heirs to an empire. Their rivalry is dangerous enough without you in the middle." Clara lowered her gaze, shame burning through her. If only he knew the full truth. If only he knew why she couldn't walk away. because Richard Cross wasn't just the father of Nathaniel and Nicholas, he was hers too. The breaking point came at a charity gala hosted at the Cross family's grand estate. Chandeliers glittered, champagne flowed, and the city's elite swirled in gowns and tuxedos. Clara had been invited as part of her work with the foundation. She almost didn't come, afraid to see the twins together in public, but the cause was too important, and refusing would only raise questions. The moment she entered, heads turned. She wore a simple black dress, elegant but understated, her hair loose around her shoulders. She didn't need diamonds to shine, her very presence drew eyes. Nicholas was the first to approach, dazzling in a midnight blue suit. "Clara," he said, offering his arm, "finally I can show you my world the right way." Before she could respond, Nathaniel appeared, his expression guarded. "Clara, would you like some air? The garden's quieter." The air between the brothers crackled like electricity. Guests noticed. Whispers spread, and Clara felt trapped, a fragile thread pulled between two storms. She excused herself quickly, slipping out to the balcony. Her hands trembled as she gripped the railing, the night air cool against her burning skin. Why did I come? Why hadn't I just walked away months ago? "Clara?" She turned to see Nathaniel behind her, his gaze soft. "You don't have to stay. If this is too much, I'll drive you home." Her eyes stung. "You're too kind to me." Nathaniel stepped closer. "Not kindness, truth." He hesitated, his voice lower. "I care about you, Clara. More than I should." Her breath caught. The words she'd feared and secretly longed for. And before she could respond, the balcony doors slammed open. Nicholas stood there, his eyes blazing. He'd seen enough. "So it's true, you've been sneaking around behind my back?" "It's not like that," Clara whispered, panic rising. But Nicholas wasn't listening. His fists clenched, his voice a growl. "You always wanted to beat me, didn't you, Nate? And now you think you've won?" "Stop," Nathaniel warned. "This isn't about you." Nicholas laughed bitterly. "It's always about me. You take the company, take the spotlight, and now you want to take her too." Guests began peering through the doors drawn by the commotion. Clara's chest tightened. This couldn't happen. Not here. Not like this. "Enough," she cried, stepping between them. "You don't understand. Neither of you understand." Her voice cracked, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I can't be with either of you, because if you knew the truth—" She stopped, choking on the words. Both brothers froze, confusion flashing in their eyes. "What truth?" Nathaniel asked softly. Clara shook her head, backing away. "I can't. Not here. Please." And before either twin could stop her, she fled into the night, her heart pounding, the weight of her secret pressing harder than ever before. The gala ended in scandal. Whispers spread like wildfire. The Cross twins fighting over the same girl, storming out in chaos. The tabloids feasted on the drama, headlines splashing across the morning papers. Richard Cross summoned his sons the next day, fury in his eyes. "You've humiliated this family. Do you think investors will trust you when you can't even control yourselves?" Nicholas stormed out, muttering curses. Nathaniel remained silent, his mind not on the company, but on Clara's words. "If you knew the truth." What truth? The question burned in him, refusing to let go. Meanwhile, Clara locked herself in her apartment, the shoebox spread across her bed. The letters, the documents, the photograph. She pressed her forehead against her hands, whispering to herself, They can't know. They can never know. But deep down, she knew the storm was coming. Secrets don't stay buried forever, and hers was about to explode.
The night after the gala, Clara couldn't sleep. She sat cross-legged on the floor of her small apartment, the shoebox open before her. The letters were scattered like ghosts, the photograph resting on top, its edges worn from years of being hidden, handled, hidden again. Her mother's handwriting stared up at her from one of the yellowed envelopes. "Clara, if you ever meet him, promise me you'll stay away." But fate hadn't given her that choice. Nathaniel and Nicholas had found her, loved her, fought for her, and now she was caught in the kind of storm her mother had feared all along. A knock shattered the silence. Clara's breath caught. Slowly, she tucked the photograph under the stack of papers and rose to her feet. "Nathaniel," she whispered when she opened the door. He stood there, in the hallway, his suit wrinkled, his eyes rimmed with exhaustion. He looked nothing like the composed air the world knew. "I couldn't stop thinking about what you said," he admitted. "Clara, what truth?" Her throat closed. She glanced over his shoulder, half expecting Nicholas to appear too, but the hallway was empty. "Please," Nathaniel urged, "I need to know." Clara's eyes filled with tears. She stepped back, allowing him inside. For a moment they stood in silence, the shoebox sitting like a loaded gun between them. Nathaniel followed her gaze, then frowned. "What's that?" Clara's hands trembled as she lifted the photograph. She held it out, unable to speak. Nathaniel took it carefully, his brows furrowed as he studied the faded image. A man and a woman, young, smiling. The man's arm around the woman's shoulders. His own father's face staring back at him, and beside him, Clara's mother. Nathaniel's breath caught. "No." Clara's voice broke. "I didn't want you to find out like this, but yes, your father, he's my father too." The words hung in the air, heavy, undeniable. Nathaniel dropped into a chair, his body rigid. His father, the man who preached loyalty, honor, control, had betrayed them all. And Clara, the girl who had quietly stolen his heart, was not just forbidden, but blood. Nathaniel pressed the hand over his mouth, struggling to breathe. This can't be real." Clara slid the letters toward him. "It is. My mother never wanted me to tell you. She was ashamed. She said your father abandoned us, but her voice cracked. "I couldn't stop myself from caring about you, about both of you, even when I knew I shouldn't." Nathaniel's mind raced, every memory of Clara now tainted by a truth he couldn't escape. He had wanted to protect her, cherish her, but how could he when she was family? He rose abruptly, his chair scraping the floor. "Nicholas has to know." Clara's heart stopped. "No. Please, Nathaniel. He'll explode. He'll destroy everything." Nathaniel's voice was steel. "He deserves the truth. We both do." The confrontation came the very next morning. Nicholas barged into Nathaniel's office, fury still burning from the gala. "Where is she?" he demanded. "You think you can keep her from me? You think you can steal?" Nathaniel cut him off. "Enough, Nicholas. This isn't about you or me anymore. It's about the truth." Nicholas blinked, thrown by his brother's tone. "What truth?" Nathaniel's eyes were cold, haunted. He slid the photograph across the desk. Nicholas picked it up casually, then froze. His smirk died. His jaw slackened. What is this?" "Our father. Nathaniel said quietly. With Clara's mother. Clara is our half-sister. The room went silent. Nicholas stared at the photograph as if it were poison. His chest rose and fell rapidly, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the edges. No, he whispered. No, that's impossible. It's the truth, Nathaniel said. The truth? Nicholas laughed bitterly, the sound hollow. The truth is, you'll say anything to keep her from me. You always twist things, always act superior, but this is low, even for you. Nicholas, don't. Nicholas slammed the photograph onto the desk. You think you've won, but I don't care what story you spin. Clara's mine. That evening, Nicholas appeared at Clara's apartment, his eyes wild. Tell me it's a lie, he begged. Tell me Nathaniel made it up. Clara's chest ached. Tears slid down her cheeks. I wish I could, but it's true, Nicholas. I'm your sister. Nicholas stumbled back as if struck. His face crumpled, his swagger shattering into raw devastation. You knew. You knew. All this time, you knew. I didn't want to, Clara cried. I tried to stay away, but you wouldn't let me. Neither of you would. Nicholas pressed a hand to his face, his shoulders shaking. Do you have any idea what you've done to me, to us? Clara reached out, but he recoiled, his eyes burning. Stay away from me, he hissed. Forever. And then he was gone. The twins confronted Richard Cross that night in his penthouse office. Nathaniel slammed the photograph onto his father's desk. How could you? Richard's face remained unreadable, but his silence spoke volumes. Tell us she's not our sister, Nicholas demanded, his voice breaking. Tell us this is some mistake. Richard sighed heavily, sinking back into his chair. It was a long time ago. Before your mother and I married, I made mistakes, but it doesn't matter now. Doesn't matter? Nathaniel's voice rose. You've destroyed us. You've destroyed her. Richard's jaw tightened. I provided for you. For all of you. What's done is done. We don't speak of it again. Nicholas's laugh was bitter, broken. That's your answer? Bury it? Pretend none of this happened? Richard's gaze turned icy. Do you want to throw away your future over one girl? Over one mistake I made decades ago? Grow up. The twins stared at him, the empire they once idolized crumbling in their eyes. For the first time, they saw their father not as a titan of industry, but a man, flawed, selfish, cowardly, and they hated him for it. News of the scandal leaked faster than they could contain it. Someone from the Gala whispered to a tabloid, and soon, headlines screamed about the Cross family's hidden affair, the illegitimate daughter, the twin heirs at war. Investors panicked, the company's stock wavered, reporters swarmed Clara's cafe until she quit her job. Nathaniel buried himself in work, trying to salvage the empire, but his eyes were hollow. Nicholas disappeared into nights of liquor and reckless abandon, chasing distractions he could never catch. And Clara? Clara hid, alone, burdened with the knowledge that her very existence had shattered the lives of two men who had once loved her. Weeks passed. One night, Nicholas showed up at Nathaniel's office, drunk and furious. This is your fault, he slurred. You ruined everything. If you didn't tell me, I could have... Could have what? Nathaniel snapped. Lived a lie? Slept with our sister? Is that what you wanted? Nicholas lunged, fists swinging. The two brothers crashed into desks and glass, years of rivalry exploding into violence. Security pulled them apart, but the damage was done. The truth hadn't just broken their hearts, it had broken their bond. And through it all, Clara stood at the center, her heart heavy with guilt, because she knew one thing. The truth had changed everything, but it wasn't finished yet.
because the question remained, could anything be rebuilt from the ruins?
The storm had passed, but the ruins remained. Weeks turned into months, and the Cross family empire was no longer the unshakable dynasty it had once been. The tabloids had moved on to fresher scandals, investors had steadied, and the world spun forward. But for Nathaniel, Nicholas, and Clara, the world had stopped. Clara walked through the quiet park one autumn morning, leaves crunching beneath her shoes. She clutched her coat tighter, the chill biting through. She hadn't seen either twin in weeks, not since the fight, not since everything collapsed. Part of her longed to reach out, to comfort them, to try to mend what had been broken, but she couldn't. She knew her presence only reminded them of the wound they could never heal. So Clara made a choice. She would leave. That evening she packed her bags. The letters and photograph, those she burned, watching the smoke curl into the night sky, like memories fading into ash. I won't let this define me. I won't let my mother's past chain me anymore. In his glass-walled office high above the city, Nathaniel sat staring at a document but reading none of the words. He had thrown himself into work, sealing deals, cutting costs, holding the empire together, but the fire that had once driven him now burned cold. Clara's face haunted him, the softness in her eyes, the warmth of her smile, things he would never allow himself to see again. For the first time in his life, Nathaniel realized power and wealth meant nothing if it came at the expense of truth. And yet, he carried on, not for himself, but because someone had to. If Nicholas wouldn't, then he would. Nicholas was unraveling. Nights blurred into empty bottles and fleeting flings, all masks to cover the pain clawing inside him. His charm was gone, replaced by a bitterness that frightened even those who loved him. One night, he found himself standing at the edge of the Cross family penthouse balcony, staring down at the glittering city. His chest heaved, his mind spiraling. Everything I loved, gone. But then he remembered Clara's words. You're more than this, Nicholas. You just don't see it yet. Something inside him cracked. He stepped back. He wasn't ready to give in, not yet. Richard Cross thought he had weathered the storm. His empire still stood, his name still carried weight. But late one night, as he sat in his study, his wife walked in silently and laid a folded letter on his desk. I can't do this anymore, she said simply, her voice heavy with years of betrayal finally breaking free. You've built an empire, Richard, but you destroyed a family. And she left. For the first time, Richard Cross, the man who commanded skyscrapers and boardrooms, sat alone, and the silence roared louder than any scandal ever could. Winter settled over the city when Nathaniel found Nicholas sitting on a bench by the river, breath clouding in the icy air. For weeks, Nathaniel had tried to stay away, to bury himself in work, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't ignore the bond that tied him to his brother. Nicholas, he said softly. Nicholas glanced up, his eyes red, but sober for once. You were right, Nicholas muttered. About everything. About Clara, about father, about me. Nathaniel sat beside him. I wasn't right. I was just broken too. For a long while, they sat in silence, the water flowing endlessly before them. Finally, Nathaniel said, We can't change what happened, but we can choose what happens next. Nicholas let out a shaky laugh. I don't even know who I am without her. You're my brother, Nathaniel replied firmly, and that has to be enough. Slowly, Nicholas nodded. For the first time in months, a fragile thread of brotherhood wove between them again. By spring, Clara was gone. She left behind no forwarding address, no contact, no trace, except a final letter delivered to both brothers. In it, she wrote, I will always carry you in my heart,
both of you. But our story was never meant to be one of love. It was meant to be a lesson about truth, about family, about breaking cycles of pain before they destroy us. You must live, you must heal, and you must forgive, not for me, but for yourselves. Please don't look for me. My path is elsewhere. I wish you peace. Nathaniel read the letter in silence, his chest heavy but calm. Nicholas wept openly, clutching the pages as though they might vanish, and then together they let her go. Years later, the cross name still adorned skyscrapers, but the men who bore it were different. Nathaniel led with humility now, never forgetting the cost of secrets. Nicholas, after years of struggle, found sobriety and purpose, not in chasing love or wealth, but in mentoring others who had lost their way. As for Clara, no one knew where she went. Some whispered she returned to her mother's hometown. Others said she traveled the world. But those who truly knew her believed this: Clara Bennett had finally found freedom. When millionaire twins fall in love with the same girl, the world expects a fairy tale. But sometimes the truth doesn't bring happily ever afters. Sometimes it brings heartbreak. And yet, even in heartbreak, there is growth. The twins learned the weight of truth. Clara learned the power of letting go, and the empire built on lies was forced to face its cracks. One truth changed everything. But in the end, that truth also set them free.